Welcome to another episode of Jay Leno's Garage. Today we're going way back to the beginning. I've had this car since just about 1982. The only car I've had longer than this is my 55 Buick Roadmaster. I bought that one as transportation. This is the first car I bought when I got some money and wanted to have some fun. This is my first real sports car, at least in California. You know, this is the car that kind of did it for me. It started the whole car thing. When I was a kid growing up in Andover, Massachusetts, there weren't a lot of cool cars around. Anything with less than 4 doors was a sports car, you know. If your dad had a 2-door sedan, oh man, that's pretty cool, you know. Most people had station wagons or 4-door sedans. And when I was 9 years old, I was riding my bike up a hill, and I got to the top of the hill, and I saw one of these in a kind of blue steel gray color. And there was an older guy polishing the car. And I saw it sitting in his driveway, and I was just transfixed. I looked at it for like 10 or 15 minutes, just staring at this car. I'd never seen anything like it. I just thought it was the greatest looking car I'd ever seen. And after a while, the guy was, you know, doing things to the car, polishing it. And he saw me, and he said, you want to sit in this car? And he called me over, he let me sit in it. And it was just fantastic. I thought it was the most exciting, greatest car I had ever seen. It was a true sports car, and it never left my mind. And when I kind of made some money, this is the first car I bought. Fast forward 40 years, I told this story in a magazine article that I had got to sit in this Jaguar XK120. And a guy in San Francisco who was from my hometown who I didn't know wrote me a letter, and he said, hey, that car you sat in, that guy still has it. It's in his barn. And I went, really? I said, he was a pretty old guy. Well, when I was 9, I thought this guy was 40 or 50. He was only 24. But when you're a kid, you think everybody's a lot older than they really are. So this guy gave me his phone number. His name was Dan Milligan. I called him up, and he remembered me. He remembered inviting me over to sit in the car. And he still had it. But he parked it in his barn in 1970, and it sat there ever since. Now, you got to understand, Andover, Massachusetts is a really old town. The barn was built late 1700s. I mean, this barn was filled with artifacts going back literally hundreds of years, and the car was buried under it. And I went back home to Andover, to my hometown, just to look at it, and there it was. He hadn't done much with it. It was still the same color. Obviously, it had been sitting in a barn and sort of deteriorating, and I think maybe one day Don will get around to restoring it, but it was the car that did it for me. Wow, here's the car, and here's Don Milligan. Don, how are you?
Very well, Jay. How are you?
This is the bushy-haired guy that showed me the car when I was 9 years old, so nothing has changed.
No, even the color is the same.
So when I got this one, it was completely stock, had the 3.4-liter motor. These were phenomenal cars. It's called the XK120 because it was capable of 120 miles an hour, which was unbelievable. You know, there weren't many American cars in the late 40s and early 50s that could even break a true 100 miles an hour. So the fact that this could do it was just incredible. You know, Clark Gable had one of these, and this was the car that all the sports stars and all the, don't forget, this predates the Corvette and the Thunderbird and all of those cars, you know, the 120 Jag. It was a huge hit when it was unveiled in 1948 at the auto show. The first couple were aluminum skin. Those are the alloy. Those are the really expensive ones, the lighter bodies. And once they realized there was such demand for the car, they started to produce it in steel. Since these engines threw a lot of heat, you could open these open and close from inside, and you open up like that, and it's got a screen to keep birds and stuff from getting in there. And it just blows, you know, cool air into the footwell, so you can get a little extra cooling. Nice little elegant mirror here, you know, just beautiful details. And the classic Smith gauges, which are just my favorite thing. The speedometer, the tach, all the gauges, you know, each mark is just beautiful to look at. I replaced this motor with a 3.8 motor from a later Jag. A lot of people like the 4.2. I like the 3.8 because I think it revs a little bit better. It just sounds better. I put a 5-speed box in it, gearbox. Other than that, everything else is done pretty much to standard spec. I didn't put disc brakes on it back in the day because it had these beautiful alloy Alphen brake drums, which I just think look kind of cool and polished up nicely. And this is the kind of car you can slow down using the transmission pretty effectively. So I never really missed the disc brakes. I like to drive it swiftly. I don't drive it crazy fast, but it's just such a wonderful, wonderful car to drive. We added, of course, the wood steering wheel, and it has a tape deck. I think the same cassette has been in here. Okay. Introducing Alan Jackson, the country western. That's got to be in there 20 years, 20, 30 years, probably, something like that. So that's pretty cool. But it is the best sounding sports car you could imagine. To me, of the XK series, there's the 120, the 140, the 150, and then the XKE. But of the XK series, the 120 to me is the purest. It's the sexiest. By the time the 140 came along, the car's a little more bulbous, a little wider, a little more leg room. And then by the time the 150 came out, it was just too big. It was too much like an American car. It had big, huge bumpers and things on it. It wasn't as appealing as this. This is the Roadster. This has no windows. Well, you have plastic windows, but no roll-up windows. Then they made the convertible, what do they call it? They made a hardtop, of course, a 120. And then they made the drop head coupe, which had roll-up windows and a beautiful top, but it didn't look as sexy as this. But let me open the hood and show you what the engine looks like. This engine was sort of the small block Chevy of England. It was used in all the Jags and the sedans and the limousines and the XKs. This engine ran from about 1948, God, up until the 80s, probably. It was really a beautiful, terrific design, beautiful looking engine with these alloy valve covers. This one's got 3 Webers on it. Originally it would have 2 SUs. These 3 Webers make a nice noise. Electronic ignition, pretty straightforward, nothing unusual here. It's got an oil cooler here in the front. Then I've got like a little jacket that slips over this in the wintertime so to keep the oil from getting too cold. Jaguar's got a reputation of, I think the reputation is mostly the fact that American Garage didn't know how to work on them or didn't have the tools. All the nuts and bolts are British Standard or Whitworth. They're not American. Then, ham-fisted mechanics would kind of fix these like they were flathead Fords. They're not. They're a pretty sophisticated motor. Stock, this was probably around 160 horse, maybe 180 with some tuning. I think now it's about 250, something like that. It just sounds glorious. It's just a wonderful, wonderful motor. I added the fog lights and we put the screens on. Those were popular back in the day to prevent rocks from breaking the glass. It has the wire wheels, knockoff wire wheels. The one I saw had spats on the back. By that, I mean it covered the rear wheel so you could barely see the rear wheel. Let's close this up again here. I had this done at a place called XK's Unlimited up near, up past Santa Barbara. As you can see, there's a plate right on there. Built for Jay Leno. There you go. And of course, I love the hood strap here. You can get these. A lot of Bugattis had these, and I called the Bugatti place. He goes, yeah, we have straps. They're $350 a piece. I know, okay. And then I went to a bridal shop, a horse place. I said, you can make one of these? He goes, yeah. It'll cost you about 15 bucks. I said, that's okay. Yeah, I'll go for the 15. Yeah. So you don't really need to go to the Bugatti guy. You get these just about anywhere. What else? Let's come around the back of the car. The early 50s was a great time for British motoring because the British had, well, the fastest land vehicles you could buy. The fastest saloon car was the Bentley Continental at 120-something miles an hour. Fastest sports car was the XK120, and the fastest motorcycle was the Vincent Black Shadow. So the British had all 3 categories. Pretty impressive. As you can see, it's a very elegantly styled car. You've got a locking gas cap right there. And there is no actual gas cap. I'll show you how that works. Well, here, let me do that for you right now. Everybody has this now, where you don't have a gas cap anymore. You just have. See, there's no cap. This rubber plug here seals once you shut the door. You know, Ford and everybody else has that new deal where there's no cap. You just open the door, you stick it in. Then when you shut this, it seals right here. Plug goes in there, and you lock it up. These are your tail lights here. Little bumperette kind of deal, so that's kind of funny. Let's take a look at the trunk. As you see, you got a full-size spare tire, which is kind of cool. You don't get that anymore. You got a proper toolkit right there. You got your manual right here, operating how to fix everything by the side. And this is a day when the manuals really told you how to do stuff. Now manuals just say, do not drink contents of battery. You know, even new manuals, oh, what's the tire pressure? Please see your dealer. Oh, shut up. You know, this tells you everything, valve clearance, everything. You want to rebuild your engine by the side of the road? No problem. You can do it with this baby. And you got your hammer here, brass for your knockoff so you don't chip the chrome. You got your jack and a full-size spare tire. None of this stupid little can of air that goes, no, you don't have that. This was quite a car back in its day. And you know, it was a real bargain too. These were not cheap, but they certainly weren't expensive compared to some of the other European stuff like Ferrari and Maserati. To me, these were always the ultimate. This is a car that the average guy could aspire to without totally breaking the bank. You know, nobody could afford Maseratis or Ferraris, but these were reasonably priced. And they ran with the big boys too, which I thought was pretty cool. This is the era when they won Le Mans, what, 4 times in the 50s? So we'll fire it up and you can hear what it sounds like. And this thing's a lot of fun. Come on, let's go for a drive. You know, this car is actually how I met Bernard, our shop foreman. Bernard used to race Jags. He owned a shop that specialized in Jaguar repair. I had a valve hang up in the head. We pulled the head off and we thought, who's the best guy to take it to? Was Bernard, this guy Bernard Jugley. So we brought it to him. Boy, he did a beautiful job. The car's run perfectly ever since. And I thought, you know, instead of sending stuff out and having him do it, why don't I just have him come work for me? And that's what we did. He moved down here, he got a house, and he's been the shop foreman now for the last, well, pretty close to 20 years, and he does just a great job. And that's why this car runs and sounds so good. You know, this is the car I'm talking about when I say all the fun happens between 40 and 110 or 120 miles an hour, because that's when this car really shines. You know, I've got an awful lot of cool stuff in the garage, but it always comes back to this one, because this was the first real sports car I ever had. And it just makes the most glorious sound. Listen. You know, it's funny, if they only built 100 of these, they'd be $1 million a piece. But they built thousands of these Jags, so consequently, for the longest time, you can get that done for pretty much close to nothing. And XKs are still, XK120s are still pretty reasonable compared to most exotic cars, because this truly is an exotic car, but it's one you could drive every day. It's fast, it's reliable, it's dependable, doesn't overheat. Just a wonderful, wonderful car. And that sound. I would say this is just about as fast as maybe a standard C5 Corvette with 350 horsepower. This weighs a little bit less. Certainly not slow. I mean, obviously there are faster cars, but certainly not from this period. The greatest Jaguar I ever got to drive was when they brought Steve McQueen's XKSS. Oh man, what a revelation that was. I just thought it was a little better version of this. No, totally different car. The engine's sort of tilted. But if I can't have that one, I'll take this one any day. Because when you put your foot in it, like an orchestra. '54. It's amazing. Still one of the best sounding engines ever. This really was an amazing engine in period, and still is today. I mean, it's got plenty of bottom end torque. It pulls strong all the way through the rev range. It's really an impressive piece of engineering. It's the kind of car you just look for bridges you can go under so you can hear that engine reverberate off the walls. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It's a bridge right here. I think William Lyons borrowed a little bit from some of the great cars of Europe when he designed this. There's a bit of a Bugatti look to it, or a Tabo Lago teardrop, you know, but whatever the reason, I'm glad he did it, because it's just a beautiful shape. It's a car you love to wash, you know, just because it just makes you feel good. You can take this thing to $7 grand, it's bulletproof. See, people love this car. They just wave. You know, there's been a lot of sports cars here. We got the McLaren F1 and the P1 and the Ford GT and the Carrera GT. But you never get your first love, and that's what this one was for me. This is the car that really does it for me. It's just so much fun to drive. It's so exciting. It makes all the right noises. Let's just say you never forget your first love. This is one of the first cars we did when I got this website, but we did it back in the old format, and it was only about 4 minutes long. So we wanted to just come back 15, 16 years later and show you what it's really like. So hope you enjoyed this piece of nostalgia. It was great fun for me, and we'll see you guys next week.
Mm-hmm.